everybody, welcome to WTF Hammer Underworlds. So today is going to be my final Season 3 Warband review, which will basically catch me up to where the game is now. So it was a pretty long road, happy to have made it this far. Last Warband, of course, being Morgwaeth's Blade-Coven. And as far as lore goes, these guys were basically sent to Beastgrave to die, more or less, because Morathi is basically trying to get revenge on Morgwaeth and sent her on a fool's errand into Beastgrave. But their progress in Beastgrave might lead them to be able to eventually escape and return for revenge. So in this video, as I always do, I'm going to be looking at this Warband's fighter cards, their faction-specific cards, then I'm going to be rating them and comparing them to every Warband that I've rated so far, which is basically every Warband except for Dire Chasm, which I'll be getting into in 2 or 3 weeks. I'll start rolling into the Dire Chasm reviews. So starting with fighter cards, these guys are interesting. There's 5 units, definitely have the sexiest miniatures, and they all interestingly inspire in the 3rd round, although kind of like Thundrik's Profiteers, they have sort of a special method of inspiring through Morgwaeth, which we're going to look at right now. I'll just start by talking about that inspiring mechanic. So her ability is basically called Blood Sacrament, and whenever an enemy fighter is taken out of action, you can basically choose and inspire one friendly fighter, which is pretty cool. Morgwaeth herself is kind of like Spike Claw a little bit. I mean, she has that reach, glaive, 2 hammer, 2 damage, going to 3 damage when inspired, has cleave, 4 movement goes to 5 movement, has 2 dodge, which is solid, 4 wounds, always solid as well. Next, there's Kyrie, who's a hunter, also very powerful, a little bit squishier with 3 wounds, but good movement, 5 movement all the time. Medusa, she has a range 4 bow that lands on 3 swords, doing 1 damage with snare, uninspired, but then landing on hammers when inspired and also getting cleave, so incredibly accurate bow. Sacrificial knife, not so exceptional. Next, there's Camise, who is very fragile but very deadly if kept alive and if equipped properly. Has her barbed whip, 3 swords, 2 damage, and then combos into her bladed buckler, so she can potentially do 3 damage uninspired and then 4 damage inspired, which is really nice for a low wound unit. Could also be coupled with other cards that have combo related mechanics to make her a pretty dangerous powerhouse, although she does only have 1 dodge, 2 wounds when uninspired, so can be taken out of action before she's able to be incredibly useful. Next is Kirsa, one of the more flimsy units, 3 swords, 1 damage, remains 3 swords, 1 damage, but in both cases always gets an extra damage on a crit. Main benefit is the extra movement and dodge that comes from being inspired. And Lethier, 3 swords, 1 damage, inspired and uninspired, but can resolve the damage step twice when inspired if she has 2 or more successes in an attack action, which is pretty nice. Also getting that 5 movement and 2 dodge when inspired. So that does for this Warband's fighter cards, which have some pros. Pros being that they have special combat abilities. They have cleave, they have ensnare, they have combo. They have extra damage special abilities, they have high movement when inspired, high defense when inspired because 2 dodge is good, they have high accuracy, they have range capabilities, and they have a medium model number, which does give them quite a few options with regard to gameplay style. Con, they do have a tricky inspire condition, requiring that you take enemy units out of action, basically, because waiting till the 3rd round is not very reasonable, and they have generally low wounds, which is not ideal. So that does it for my assessment of their fighter cards. Let's take a look at this Warband's objective cards, starting with their surge cards. First card is Bloodright, worth 1 glory. Score this immediately when a friendly fighter holding an objective makes an attack action that takes the enemy fighter out of action. So tricky to score. I'm giving this a B. Lots of conditions. Must be holding an objective and not only land an attack, but take an enemy fighter out of action with that attack. It's hard. Might be a C. Next is Consecrate Decane. Scores immediately when a friendly fighter's range 1 or 2 attack action takes an enemy fighter holding an objective out of action. So this time take an enemy fighter on an objective out of action. A little bit less tricky, but still tricky. I'm giving it a B. Perfect Kill. Scores immediately when a friendly fighter's attack action deals exactly enough damage to take an enemy target out of action. Worth 1 glory. So that's fairly reliable. I'm giving that an A. Next is Swift Sacrifice, worth 1 glory. Scores immediately when a friendly leader or Kyrie makes a range 1 or range 2 attack action that takes an enemy fighter out of action. So it is a nice card in that Kyrie and Morgwaeth are pretty good candidates to take enemies out of action, although for Kyrie, the fact that it has to be her melee attack is a little bit lame. Worth 1 glory as a score immediate. I'm giving it an A. Next is Torturous Death, Score this immediately when your warband makes a third or subsequent attack that targets the same enemy fighter in this phase. Doesn't have to take them out of action, worth 1 glory. I'm giving it a B because it requires that either you attack a very strong foe or that you miss a lot against weaker foes, and really does just force your attack actions, which I'm not a huge fan of. So that does it for the Surge. Next are the Score in the End Phase card, starting with Blessings of Cain. Score this in end phase if 2 or more surviving friendly fighters are inspired, worth 1 glory. So pretty reliable. I'm giving it a B, only worth 1 glory. And you might inspire a unit that gets taken out of action because they are a little bit squishy, which makes this not super reliable. There's Daughters of the First Temple. Scores in an end phase if 2 or more enemy fighters are out of action, worth 1 glory. So I'm giving that a C because if you're playing against an elite warband like Morgwaeth or something, this becomes really hard to score. But it could be fairly easy to score if you're against a Horde warband, but then you only get 1 glory for it, so I don't think it's great. There's Devoted Disciple. Scores in an end phase if 1 or more surviving friendly fighters have 1 or more wound tokens, worth 1 glory. So pretty reliable. I'm giving that an A. At worst, you can just run through a lethal hex if you really wanted to. There's Purposeful Strike. Scores in an end phase if a friendly fighter with 1 or more charge tokens is holding an objective, so that's nice, assuming the fighter survives after charging onto the objective. I'm giving it a B because your fighter could be knocked off of it. It is a Score in the End phase card. Ritualized Formation. Faction-specific supremacy. I'm giving it an A because they do have other objective-centered objective cards. It does kind of synchronize with that, although they don't really have any innate movement mechanics or push mechanics, but they do have good movement. Next is Triumphant Stance, the last of the Score in the End phase cards. It's a duel. Scores in an end phase if 1 or more friendly fighter is holding an objective and no other fighter is holding an objective, worth 2. Pretty unreliable. I'm giving it a B. Really depends on what type of warband you're playing against. Alright, so that does it for the Score in the End phase cards. Final Score in the third end phase cards, which typically are not the best to put in your deck, worth 3 glory. Scores in the third end phase if either all enemy fighters are out of action, so Annihilation, or your warband holds all objectives in enemy territory. Pretty unreliable. I gave it a B. Honestly, it could be a C. I think C is a better choice. It really depends. If you're playing against a warband that just tosses all their objectives into friendly territory, then it becomes easy to maybe hold that objective at the end of the third round. But the Annihilation aspect is very hard to pull off. I'm surprised that this picture has them doing it against Morgwaeth of all warbands. Alright, so that does it for the objective cards, which basically promote attacking enemy fighters in various ways, mostly centered around objectives, inspiring, taking wounds, and surviving and holding objectives. So let's take a look at this warband's power cards. Starting with their ploys, we have Blood, Bane, Venom, which is a poison. As a reaction, play this after a friendly fighter's successful range 1 or range 2 attack action. Roll 3 attack dice. For each roll of crit, the target of the attack action is dealt 1 damage. So that's pretty interesting. I'm giving it a B. Could be incredibly devastating, but most likely will be moderately or not devastating at all. Next, there's Carve a Rune. As a reaction, play this during a friendly fighter's range 1 or range 2 attack action that succeeds before dealing damage. If there was 1 or more crit in the attack roll, gain 1 spent glory. So nice because it's a retroactive card that can be used to just gain a glory. I'm giving that an S. Catechism of Murder. Choose a friendly fighter. That fighter is inspired as long as Morgwaeth is on the battlefield. So free inspire card. I'm giving that an A. Crimson Rejuvenation. Heal 1 to each friendly fighter within 2 hexes of your leader. So pretty nice, although these guys aren't the toughest, so if they have a wound, they are probably going to be out of action, at least for 3 of the fighters. I'm giving this a B. I don't see it being that useful. There's Drilled to Perfection. Choose 1 friendly fighter and up to 1 adjacent friendly fighter. Give each chosen fighter 1 guard token, so that's pretty nice, especially with the 2 dodge when inspired. I'm giving that an A. There's Fanatical Faith. The first time a friendly fighter would be dealt any amount of damage in the next activation, that fighter is dealt 1 damage instead. That's always good, especially for a squishy warband. I'm giving it an A. Headlong Fury. Choose 1 inspired friendly fighter. The chosen fighter makes a move action. Do not give the chosen fighter a move token for that action. So pretty nice free move. Giving that an A. Incredible Agility. In the next activation, friendly fighters other than Kyrie treat lethal hexes as normal hexes and can move through occupied hexes but cannot end their movement in an occupied hex. It's a nice way to move around the battlefield. Also nice touch that it doesn't apply to Kyrie, who's basically a Medusa with a big snake body. and naturally would not be very agile, so it's just kind of cool. I'm giving it a B. There's perfect precision. You can reroll 1 attack dice in the attack roll of the first attack action made by a friendly fighter in the next activation. I'm giving it a B. Could be worth a C. I prefer the +1 die, but I guess it depends on if you have cards that require that you make more precision types of attacks, like Branching Fate or something, where you have to have different symbols on all your dice. But generally, I prefer the +1 die over the reroll. And there's Zealot's Rage. As a reaction, play this after a friendly fighter's attack action that fails. Do it again. Giving that an A. The second swing is always nice. And that does it for the ploys, which typically promote gaining glory points, inspiring, healing, causing damage, improving defense, improving movement, and improving accuracy. So moving on to the upgrades, we have Crimson Shard, restricted to Morgwaeth. She can reroll 1 attack dice in her range 1 and 2 attack actions. Super useful. I'm giving that an A. Next is Crone Blade, which is an attack action upgrade. 3 swords, 2 damage. After an attack action, if it succeeds, heal 1. Pretty nice. I'm giving it an A. Death Dancer. As a reaction after this fighter's attack action, but not during a super action, push this fighter 1 hex. So allows a fighter to be pretty mobile. Giving that a B. There's High Oracle's Butcher. After this fighter's attack action that takes an adjacent enemy fighter out of action, gain 1 additional glory point. So kind of like a melee Tome of Offerings, restricted to Kyrie. It's nice. I'm only giving it a B though because she really thrives in her ranged capabilities. There is Invigorated Attack, +1 dice to this fighter's attack actions while this fighter is holding an objective. So circumstantially useful, but very useful in that circumstance. I'll only give it a B though. There is Rapturous Defense, a +1 defense to the more fragile of the units, bringing them up to 3 dodge when inspired, which is actually really evasive. They only have 2 wounds though. It's a tricky choice. I'm only giving this a B. I wouldn't typically put it in any of my decks. There's Rune of Cain, restricted to Morgwaeth. When this fighter is taken out of action by an enemy fighter's attack action or by an enemy warband's gambit, before removing this fighter from the battlefield, each adjacent enemy fighter is dealt 1 damage. I'm giving that a C. Requires that Morgwaeth be taken out of action, which would suck, and then only does damage against adjacent enemies, which is not a guarantee that there are adjacent enemies, especially if this is equipped. Your enemy can work their way around that, so not a very good card. Rune of Slaughter, +1 damage to this fighter's range 1 and range 2 attack actions for each crit in the attack roll. So I'm giving it a C. Could be worth a B, because if you just happen to get a lucky roll and roll 2 crits, for example, it could pile on quite a bit of damage, but it's not a guaranteed damage. Great Strength is something that I typically prefer just because of its reliability. There's Victor of 1,000 Duels. As a reaction, during a range 1 attack action that targets this fighter and fails, before the drive back step, roll an attack dice. On a hammer or crit, this fighter cannot be driven back and can make an attack action. It must target the attacker. So a 50% chance to make an attack against a range 1 enemy who missed. I'm giving that a C, most because of that 50% chance of failing, which I'm not a big fan of. And finally, there's Whirling Whip, unique to Chemis, gives her a pretty accurate scything attack that does 2 damage. I'm giving it a B. It's decent, but her combo abilities are more amazing in my opinion. So that does it for all this Warband's cards. Their upgrade cards typically promote improving accuracy, pushing friendly fighters, gaining additional glory points, improving defense, causing damage, increasing damage, an out-of-turn attack action, and upgrading weapons in a moderately exceptional way. And here's the full overview. So objectives are not very good. They're objective cards. They have nothing that is S. They have a few A's. They have some reliable cards. Maybe I shouldn't say their objectives aren't very good, but they're definitely not amazing. They're definitely not at the level of some warbands who have just auto-include objective cards all over the place. Gambits, pretty good, 1S, lots of A's. Upgrades, typically lacking. Overall, card options are not the most amazing, but they're definitely not bad. And that basically does it for the review. So time to rate this warband and compare to the rest of the warbands that I've overviewed, this one being number 26. So my first point about this warband is that they have very high damage output potential. They're best at killing when inspired, but they need to kill in order to inspire, however, which is a bit of a struggle for them because they're at their best killing capacity before they're inspired, which requires them to kill Second point, these guys' objective cards promote both aggression and objective holding play, which is nice. Their power cards promote aggression as well, but their objective holding game is not so strong. They have a couple push cards, but nothing that really compares to the push mechanics of other strong positional warbands. Also, their units are relatively easy to take out of action. They counter this by having some healing and defense boosting cards though, but overall are a little bit squishy. And there's also not a ton of them. They're kind of Garrick's Reaverish in that sense. And fourth point is that these guys are very balanced in the options available to them, which is nice, which means that they can be unpredictable. So when you play against this warband, you really don't know what style you're coming up against, which gives a strength to the person playing this warband. So with all this in mind, I've decided to rate this warband as an A, but a pretty weak A. I'm putting them just above Grashrak's Despoilers because I feel they are superior to them, because Grashrak's struggle in many ways, although they do have good cards as well. All this is a tough choice, but I would say that Morgwaeth is above Grashrak's Despoilers, but below Mollog's Mob, because I feel that generally speaking, Mollog's Mob will and has played more successfully in metas. So this is my full grid from Season 1 to Season 3. It's been a long road. There's lots of warbands here. There's lots of analyses that I've done, and I hope you enjoyed it so far. If you have any thoughts or suggestions, please comment below. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this content. In the link, I'm going to be posting my last balancing video that I'll ever be making in this format, where I'm going to be recommending how Games Workshop could make changes to this warband to make them a little bit more balanced with other warbands that I've also balanced as well. So you can check out those videos too if you want. And in the next week or next couple weeks, I'm going to do a tier list video where I'm going to go through all the tiers that you just saw me do, give some justification, and just sort of prompt some discussion on how these warbands should be ranked overall, regardless of meta. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I hope you all have a nice day.